Newe Daryl. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Doug and I's presentation is entitled Metimankwiki kimehšoominaanaki. We follow our ancestors' trail, sharing historical Myaamia language documents across Myaamionki. So Ayacheke, Andrew Strack, Wayneswane, Nila Myaamia. My name is Andrew Strack. I'm a citizen of the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma, and I'm the coordinator of the Tech and Publications Office of the Myaamia Center. I'll allow Doug to introduce himself now.
Hi, I'm Doug Troy. I'm a faculty member at Miami in the College of Engineering and Computing. I'm a faculty affiliate of the Myaamia Center, and I've been working for maybe the last 5 years or so with my students and with the Myaamia Center on various projects, usually related to developing digital resources for the community and for the center.
Okay. As I mentioned, I'm the coordinator of the Technology and Publications Office, so I'm going to do my duty in that department real quick and ask Karen to take photos if you can, since I forgot to do that before I got started. Missionawi. So, the actual project that Doug and I and several others are working on is called the ilaatawaakani project, which basically translates to the language book. I'll introduce some of our other staff that are working on it with us as well. Jean Lee is a graduate student at Miami University in the computer science department. He is our primary programmer. Kristen Kasberg is our Myaamia Center student employee. She has painstakingly numbered all the lines in these documents that we'll display in just a minute. Carol Katz has transcribed all the documents that we have, and I know she's here somewhere. There she is. She'll be helping us answer questions later on, and you'll gain a real appreciation for all the work she's done here in a few minutes. Michael McCafferty, our French translator. David Costa, our Myaamia linguist. Doug, myself, and Daryl, of course. So the project goals. Real simply, to preserve the Lebellinger Dictionary. To do that, we're going to scan it, transcribe it, translate it, and analyze it. And once we've got all that data harvested, create an online database to store and make that information available to our geographically dispersed researchers as well as our community members. A big part of that is going to be reorganizing this information around the primary document itself, which is something that we haven't been able to do before. In the past, Daryl and David are often working from books that have essentially just been copies of these documents, not high quality scans. So to be able to look at a high quality scan while we're looking at linguistic data right next to it is going to be a real advance for us. Primarily because it allows us to correct errors more easily as we're working through these documents. All this work is being funded by a 3-year grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. So, the document itself. Why the Lebellinger Dictionary? It was neatly written. As you'll see in a moment, compared to some of the other documents, this is really meticulously written. It's in good physical condition, even though the document itself is from the 18th century. Is in really good shape, and Carol has seen it herself and can attest to that as well. It's never been worked with. The contents of this document have never been published, and it's got the most example sentences in Miami, Illinois of any document that we've yet to work with. So, Jean-Robert Lebellinger lived from 1685 to 1740, and he was a French Jesuit doing missionary work and was doing that work in southern Illinois starting in 1719 until he passed away in 1740. And this document represents that time period of his life, but also appears to contain some information from previous Jesuits. So here's a look at one page from the Lebellinger Dictionary. There are 185 of these pages. Each of them is 11 by 17 inches. And in the entire document, there are The entire document was organized by French keyword with Illinois words listed below. There are 3,330 of these French keywords. In addition to those 185 pages, there are 42 pages of religious texts written in Illinois that have no French translations. So I'll give you a chance to appreciate how much data is contained in one of these pages right here. And you can also begin to appreciate Carol's transcription work by taking a look at this and trying to read any of it. And understanding, as I said before, this is in really, really good shape. We'll get a closer look at what the document looks like. Admittedly, the scans that we're working with in the office appear much cleaner than they do on this projector screen. But a French keyword appears here. A Miami, Illinois word that corresponds to that French keyword appears there. And then the French translation that Lebellinger wrote appears next to it. And so you can see the keyword there that applies to all the text that's below. And understand that oftentimes there are two columns like they appear here. The original document rests in the John Carter Brown Library Archives at Brown University, and they're the ones that scanned this for us. Scanned in high quality, 600 DPI JPEG 2s, I think, were the format they elected to use, preserving this information indefinitely for us and for them, and allowing us to get started on this project. And it's really appropriate that Megan and Kim went before us to talk about the burden of digitization as Megan discussed it, because that library's priorities often, other libraries' priorities will differ often from our priorities. And an important part of this project being funded by the NEH grant is that it allows us to go to them and say, we will pay for scanning this document and get it moved from maybe the bottom of the list, or maybe they had no plan to scan it at all, and get it to the top and get this information preserved for us. At this point, I'll let Doug talk about the technical aspects of building the database.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, thanks, Andrew. And welcome to Jean Lee. We introduced you a few minutes ago. Jean Lee is our graduate student programmer back there. Okay. So Andrew introduced our team and briefly outlined our tasks, but this shows you some of the details. So first we obtained the high-res scans, and then Carol has been transcribing. Well, first we had an in-between step there where we had to number the pages on the images. So that was one of our student assistants, I think, did that. Kristen did that, editing the actual images to put in line numbers so that we could reference the actual lines of text once we put them in the computer. So we had to obtain the scans, number the lines, and then do the transcription onto the computer, and then add translations. And the translation process is in progress, so that's not complete at the moment. In parallel with the transcription, we decided to develop the database software. So we started transcription before we had our database ready to go, and that transcription was being done into spreadsheets, which we would then later load into the database once we had our software ready. So we had to find a suitable database software or develop it, and then we would be ready to load the data into the database. We went to our leader, Daryl, and we asked him what would he like the user interface to look like. And this is a diagram that Daryl provided for our team of his vision for how this document would be accessed online via the web. So that big box in the middle would be a page from the Lebellinger actual document that you could look at. You could look at the original. And if you can see up there on the left-hand corner would be that French keyword that Andrew mentioned. And we would have line numbers on the right, so you could reference the original document. And then multiple translations. So we had the original French along with English translation, the original Miami, Illinois, along with English translation, modern Miami speech forms, and then some language information, cognates, and related Miami, Illinois terms. And also room in there for comments from the translators and linguistics so they can make comments, add questions as they're working on the document. So starting with this, this slide kind of summarizes the information that we needed to store in the database. I mentioned the original document image, the French keyword, the various translations, and the comments. In addition to this, a key factor is obviously a comprehensive search function or a powerful search function, so you could go into that, so our researchers go into that document, be able to search for terms, find the information they need. And we want to make this document available to the general public, so we need some access control. So people that are allowed to modify it versus people that kind of have read-only access for searching. Well, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel if we didn't have to, so we went out there to look and see if there's existing software, open source software that we can use. And the field linguistic community has been pretty active in developing software tools. There's a number of them out there. We looked at these tools. We seriously looked at one called LinkSync. We were hoping that we could use these tools, but none of them really fit the needs to meet the vision that Daryl gave us. As I mentioned, these tools are for field linguists. They're mainly made for studying languages that have speakers, so recording information, documenting it, and as Wesley mentioned, we're in a situation where we're working with these archival documents. So we didn't really find an existing piece of software that would work, and none of them really also met our needs for storing these multiple translations. So we decided to develop our own software. I'll give you a little progress report. So we began the process in 2012, obtained the scans of the original document. Carol started transcribing it. And as I mentioned, she's transcribing to spreadsheets. And we started the translation process. And then in parallel, we started developing our own software. John Lee joined our team at the beginning of 2013. And Carol has been miraculously working ahead of schedule. So she actually finished the transcription, and there's over 24,000 entries from this dictionary. I mentioned the translation process is going to go on for a while, and Daryl obtained permission from the NEH to add a second document. So we've begun transcription of a second document. In the meantime, over this past year, we've been developing and testing that software. So now we can give you a little demo of where we are. This is always the most scary part of these things, to see if this demo works.
So the first thing I'll do is search for a term that's stored in the original Miami, Illinois section of the database. Oh, that's the wrong one. It's just for the camera.
Okay.
So you can see here I searched for this particular term, and it returns the one result that I wanted. And you can see the original Miami, Illinois returns, as well as its English translation, and then what document it's stored in. We can click on a search result, and then you'll see it fill in below. So we've got the original document, and I can see here that it appears on page 250, line 13, phrase 1. So if I want to scroll down and then zoom in on the original scan, I can find, all right, there's line 10, those are the numbers that Kristen has gone through and added manually on all of these pages. So appreciate the work that goes into that, counting all these lines. But then there's line 13, and I can see, okay, there's the original text that Carol's transcribed into the field below. You can see the original keyword and keyword translation that accompanies this particular entry, and then the fields that we've elected to display for our most basic visitors, who might be our language learners or historians, people who aren't linguists, basically. And displays the original Miami, Illinois, the original French, modern Myaamia speech form, a button that will play audio, and those are the main fields we want people to see. For our translators, for our transcribers, for our linguists, the tool is much more powerful, as Doug demonstrated in the diagram that we've begun working with. So you can see all the fields that are available to our workers. The modern Miami, Illinois spelling, English translation, comments, all the fields that Doug described in the diagram are taking shape here. And you can see this entry has some, for instance, a stem that goes with this particular word, and then cognates, or related terms to this particular word as well. I'll do a demonstration of one more. Searching for an English term in this to begin to appreciate the number of records that are stored within the database right now. So you can see when I search for tree, the number that begins with the number of entries that are returned and the level of detail that's involved here in some of these phrases that were recorded. So I chip, hew, smooth a tree inside in order to make a canoe. Like, that's a pretty specific level of information that's stored in this, and hopefully reveals how valuable these documents are, not only to linguists but to historians and other researchers. The level of information this is going to be revealing to us, and why it's so important to put this online and make it available to as many people as possible. Again, you can see how the document that these particular entries come from, and then as we scroll to the bottom, you can see some entries from the second document we're beginning to work with, Gravier, are also starting to appear as we begin to work on that. And again, how important that particular feature is, to be able to search across documents and know, for instance, the background of where this document was created at a particular time, and then knowing that the Gravier document was created at a different time, and begin to see how language changes or how dialects get recorded in different places. It's a really interesting way to be able to compare this information. Unless anyone has, well, you know what, I will show you the login feature.
Can everybody hear Andrew okay? I can try to put this microphone, okay.
Is that a yes?
Is that okay? I think that's an okay back there? Okay.
So I've logged in with my credentials, which then reveals the editing tools here. So I can begin editing these fields and save them, as well as add a new entry, see the history of this particular entry and how changes have been made to it. I'll try to, I know this is a feature we were just working on. Nope, it looks like it's still broken. But the audio files, as I mentioned, when that feature is working, well, when the modern Myaamia speech form appears here, and then being able to hear it right here to reduce the barrier to hearing Myaamia language spoken is a really important part of this, to make it valuable for all of our interested parties.
More slide.
Sorry? We do have more slide. I just wanted to make sure that was all demonstrated. Yeah. Okay. So, the status of the project as it stands. As Doug mentioned, we've successfully transcribed the Lebellinger dictionary, resulting in 24,200 entries, with approximately 98% of the French in that document having been translated to English already. So we have plenty of work for David and Daryl to be doing into the future. And as Doug mentioned, because we're so far ahead of schedule, this is a 3-year process and we finished transcribing the Lebellinger document so quickly, we've added the Gravier document, which is now approximately 50 to 60% transcribed, with the French translation work just now beginning on that as well. So a summary of how this project will affect all the stakeholders that might be interested here. So first, the Myaamia community. As I mentioned in the demonstration, basic translations of these terms are available, as well as giving our language learners an appreciation of the documents that this information comes from, being able to see those primary resources, and having audio files accompany all this information, I think will hopefully inspire more of our youth to learn the language and maybe direct some of them to pursue linguistics or history and continue our language revitalization effort. Myaamia Center staff, of course, this project benefits immensely. Now that we'll all be working from the same data set, it allows us to work more efficiently. The advanced search tools are going to be really important, as I mentioned in the demonstration, to learning more from all these documents at the same time. And then finally, taking the information we're learning from this and using them to improve our language learning resources. I know George is already digging into these records and using them in presentations and perhaps in curriculum for our Ewan Zapata youth programs. All sorts of ways this information is going to improve the work of the Myaamia Center. I mentioned researchers earlier. Historians can begin to contextualize the data gained from this document, this raw data, and I failed to display the excellent essay that David Costa and Michael McCafferty wrote for us, giving the historical background of this document. That's a really important part of this entire database. And finally, sharing this experience with other tribes and other people interested in revitalizing their language. As has been mentioned throughout many of these presentations, that's a responsibility that we have to help people who are going down the same paths we are. In perhaps the simplest lessons of the challenges we faced building this, the challenges we faced transcribing, translating, to possibly sharing the database software itself with another group so they don't have to go through the process we've gone through of building our own solution. Thank you for listening. I'd be happy to accept any questions you have right now or at the back of the room later on. Naomi.